Welcome to Bleaders, where you can learn and discover from those that take committed action in their business. Learn from their experience, knowledge, and wisdom, born out of putting their time and effort into what has purpose and meaning for them as leaders. Their self-direction gives them continued motivation in the face of hardship. And from them, we too can be inspired to discover our very own path of value and committed action. Please welcome your host, Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman.
Wow, wonderful to be back again, and welcome to Be Leaders with myself, Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman. And we have a very, very interesting guest for you, all the way from United States of America, from New York. And I think he's just moved, so we can ask him where he is now. Winchester, I think he said to me. What is interesting is that Matan Slagter is from the insurance world. And what better person to talk to in these very uncertain and strange conditions that we are in the world, from an economical point of view. Forget for a second the health point of view, but the turmoil, the uncertainty in business. Insurance is basically probably one of, if not the wealthiest industry in the world. And we all rely on insurance one way or another, whether it's our personal health insurance, or house insurance, or car insurance, accidental insurance, travel insurance. I mean, the list is endless and affects every single part of our life. And so I think it's a coup getting Matan Slagter in here. Somebody who is, I'll let, of course, him explain to you exactly who he is, but managing director of the accident and health side of AIG Insurance. So without further ado, I think it's time to bring in from the green room Matan Slagter. Hello and good day to you, Matan.
Dov, it's nice to be here.
Wonderful. We met towards the end of 2019, sitting in a wonderful bar, coffee shop in the middle of New York City, the first time that I'd been there, and it was absolutely a dream for me. But who would have known at that time, when we were sitting there planning all sorts of fancy things that maybe we can do together, that very shortly after that, basically the world would close down. Incredible, isn't it?
Absolutely incredible. Who would have thought?
We never really know what's going to happen tomorrow. And this kind of emphasizes that to us. And so, you know, living, I deal a lot in human behavior and human wellness and health. And one of the things that I talk about to my clients, my patients, the groups that I deal with, is that living involves a certain amount of risk. Okay, so you wake up in the morning and you go about your daily business, but as soon as you decide, you know, that you're awake and conscious and going to get on with your day, involves in the massive amounts of risk that we don't necessarily take into consideration. We kind of take it for granted a lot of the time until something starts to go wrong. And then fear might set in. And when fear sets in, we're like, well, should I take that risk or not? But as soon as we open our front door and walk outside, everything that we do has a certain amount of risk to it. So built into living is risk. And you are, I would say, the master, in my opinion, of calculating risk. I mean, that is, in a kind of in a nutshell, what you're about. Would you say that, Matan?
To a certain extent, yes. Well, on a personal level, I'm an actuary by trade. And actuaries, our trade, actuaries and underwriters, our trade is to look at risk, assess risk, and put a value to that risk. And that's how we price insurance products. It's really a prediction of the future and what might go wrong. So yes, insurance companies in general are one industry that has gotten really good and industrialized the concept and the mathematical rigor to assess risk and put a number around it.
And as I said in the introduction, you're basically one of the senior level management in AIG. Can you just give us a little bit of a background where you're actually placed in that industry?
Sure, absolutely. So I started, as I mentioned before, I started my career as an actuary. About 10 years ago, I joined a company called Chartis, and I didn't know back then, but that was right after the 2008 crisis, and AIG rebranded and called itself Chartis for about a year before it went back to AIG as a result of the financial crisis. So little did I know, I joined AIG, and I was given an opportunity to take a number of different roles. About 5 years ago, five years into my experience, my career at AIG, they brought in a new CEO for our personal insurance business. Now, personal insurance, for everybody who's listening in right now, these are all the insurance products that are sold to consumers, not businesses. We also have a commercial insurance division where we insure businesses. And we can talk about that a little bit as well. So a new CEO came over to manage this $12 billion business unit, personal insurance, which included auto insurance, homeowners, travel insurance, accident and health insurance. And he was looking for a chief of staff. So I raised my hand, interviewed for that role. And that was, well, first of all, he looked at me, very impressive individual, and said, Matan, you're an actuary. That's exactly what I'm not looking for in a chief of staff, but I'll give you a shot. Take 3 months. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, we'll find a nice, another role for you at AIG. So I took that opportunity, and I worked very hard and climbed from there.
Wonderful. So this is a bit of an interactive program. So we've got Darren Fields saying, hi, neighbor. So it's great to have people that know you kind of writing in there. So that's wonderful. And we have an amazing story about that, but we're not going to go into that right now. Our audience that's watching and listening to us is basically trying to work out their business continuity. I mean, there's a natural disaster happening as we speak. Regarding insurance and what you've just told us about your professional history and your knowledge, personal experience, I tried to kind of bring that together as a Matan Slagter kind of wisdom that we want to pass over to the people watching and listening this. First thing that people are probably going to be asking themselves is, oh my goodness, is my premiums going to go up? Are there certain things that I am insured for that are not going to be insured for anymore? Maybe particularly towards health insurance. What is your take on that from a professional point of view?
Well, the deeper I dove into AIG is a very diversified company. We have a lot of different types of insurance. The more I understood that every line of insurance, every type of insurance is different. I'll give you an example. We have a big travel insurance business, and this is an easy one for anybody to understand. You book your travel or vacation with your family. Many people also buy travel insurance along with that. So you can imagine that once COVID hit, how many trip cancellations came in, which were to a certain extent for certain travel insurance products that are sold, that was a coverage in there. In terms of premium changes, we see two elements. We have a business in AIG where we insure colleges and amateur athletes, individuals in colleges, universities, in high schools who play soccer, play football, play whatever, football in the U.S. sense of football, and we insure those individuals. And because the season is off, there's really no sports here. There's a lot of return of premiums, so people are paying less now, and they're going to expect going forward that their exposure will go down, therefore premiums will go down. On the other spectrum, for some businesses, premium may go up. So it really depends on the line of business that you're looking at. But what I would say is that going forward for anybody, especially businesses, there was an exclusion in most business interruption products that said pandemics are not covered. These are the sorts of things that businesses need to look at going forward.
So basically, pandemics in those days, from what we understood, unless you go back, over 100 years ago, were the pandemics we knew up until now were basically pandemic, maybe, but they were pretty localized and they didn't last very long. This pandemic is basically a world public health emergency where I think one of the outstanding original parts of it is the fact that the world closed down from an economically point of view. I mean, this has never been known in history. Even though they're dealing with a public health emergency, the shutting down, the shutting away of people and locking them down, basically, and closing the economy. What is your take on closing down the economy?
I'll give you some of the experience and something that we're seeing at AIG and across the insurance industry. And this is specific to the US, but I'm pretty sure the same discussions are happening in other countries. We had the big impact from a commercial perspective was for small businesses. So I came from Brooklyn. I moved from Brooklyn to Westchester. In Brooklyn, there are a lot of local restaurants, a lot of local shops that had to close for a period of time. Now, every one of those shops likely looked at their commercial insurance product and said, okay, so I have a business interruption product. Do I get coverage for this? And for the most part, the answer was no, because this sort of pandemic was excluded from coverage. Having said that, what was super interesting, and in the US, insurance is regulated at the state level. So you can think of the US as 50 separate states, 50 separate countries with different regulations. There are a few states that said, you know what? Let's pass a bill, a new regulation that says that these insurance contracts actually do cover pandemics, so that the insurance industry can help provide relief while we figure out what we're going to do next. Now that, to my knowledge, up until now, none of these bills passed because it was unconstitutional to change a contract that was already written. Maybe since I last looked, there's a possibility that they figured out an in-between where the insurance industry sends our adjuster, sends people to those shops and helps out, and then the government comes back in later. But that was a fascinating discussion at that level.
But do you think it was correct from an economical point of view, considering the circumstances, which is a public health emergency, to shut down the economy? I mean, from what are the consequences for that for the future?
I've put myself on the fence because I can go and argue both ways, and I haven't landed on any one side of the fence. One argument says, and I know this because I have a house and I have a renter in that house who owns a small business and reached out to us when this happened and said, I might be delayed in my rent payments. Now, if they were going to be delayed in their rent payment to me, then I would struggle to pay the mortgage on that second home. And I could only imagine that the longer you close the economy for, the more people are getting into that same bind. Now, lucky for me, I had a little bit of a buffer. I could sustain that, but not everybody has that sort of buffer. So from that perspective, you could start arguing, there's a point where you just can't, you have to open back the economy because people are not going to be able to withstand that. There's going to be bankruptcy. There's going to be foreclosures. On the other side of it, you have people who are vulnerable to the pandemic, to COVID-19. And once you open the economy, those people become even more vulnerable because now it's back out there. So I keep sitting on the fence and straddling the line, and there's so many other arguments that can fall on either side of it. It's a tough one. Yeah,
it's a tough one, and that's why I'm really appreciative of being able to talk to someone like yourself, because there is so much politics also involved in all these things that sometimes for the regular businessman in the street, we're not quite sure what is coming from a political level, what's coming from an economical standpoint, what's coming from a health standpoint. It's actually very confusing. Sometimes I'm here in the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, there's different policies in Scotland and in Wales and in Northern Ireland than there is in England. Everybody's doing different things at different times. And so it's not always clear at all, what is the right steps to take. And so from a risk point of view, and that's why I keep coming back to that, I would think, and from a non-professional point of view, I would think, it sounds like, if you're closing down business for a long time, even though there are health prices for that, but from a risk point of view, the risk of bankruptcy, not just of individuals or companies, but countries, must be shooting up. I mean, we are getting news every day now of large companies where they have been, up until now, being covered by government money, but now they're beginning to actually fire people. They're actually laying them off. So they're now not part of. They're not going to be part of the staff that are getting covered for money. They're just going to be unemployed. Now, I would reckon, and your opinion here is more important than mine, but I would reckon in about 6 months' time, in the middle of winter in the northern hemisphere, we're going to see masses amounts of unemployment. And how does that affect your industry? I mean, at the end of the day, you need premiums, and if the insurance companies are not getting the premiums in because the world is going bankrupt, then that's going to put a lot of pensions at risk, where a lot of pension money is invested in insurance with insurance companies. And so our future, even though we're trying to protect people's lives at present, but does it not mean really that our futures are dark?
Well, you touch on a very interesting point, and I'll just take a step back because I think this will be interesting to the audience here. Insurance, and most people probably do not appreciate it, and you are very knowledgeable about insurance relative to the average Joe. Insurance is a very interesting and old industry, and as you mentioned, very wealthy industry. Essentially, insurance is not just about risk management, it's also about trust. It's almost like the oil that gets the economy running. In other words, when we moved to this new house, the moving company had to have insurance, right? They had to have insurance. For me to have an event at a facility, there has to be some insurance there. So if something happens to one of my guests, and there's a lawsuit, there's some coverage. So insurance sort of creates trust between parties to go into business together. And what you say is absolutely right. The longer there is a shutdown, the more companies will go bankrupt, higher unemployment, and that's going to reduce the premium income of insurance companies. And to a certain extent, there might be some smaller insurance companies that are going to go out of business. And there is a trickle down. Impact. The other impact is some insurance companies, and you alluded that before, are going to say, I don't have the appetite to take on certain types of risks going forward because of what happened here. And if enough insurance companies, especially big ones like AIG, if AIG said, hey, I don't want to write a certain line of business, and I'll put an example. I don't want to write, and this is not a real example because we don't do comprehensive health insurance. I don't want to do health insurance anymore. So we would hope that other insurance companies would come in and offer that so that it's still out there. But that could create another impact where if companies cannot get insurance on their operations, then they're going to take risks that they weren't prepared for to begin with. And that just trickles down the economy. So what you say is absolutely right, and we see that.
Okay, we only have a few minutes left, Matan, and we've got a really good comprehensive understanding of where you're coming from. But what I would really like to leave our viewers and listeners with is your personal wisdom that you can contribute to us listening and watching you. What would be your one or two best tips, points, wisdom that you could impart onto, and I'm talking about the regular to medium-sized business person listening or watching this, on how to get through this unknown, very risky time?
Going back to insurance, and hopefully we see the light at the end of the tunnel soon. There's going to be a period pretty soon where every small business, every medium-sized business has to renew their insurance policy for the next year. And I think that's a very, very, very important time for those businesses to actually take a closer look at those insurance contracts, because that's risk management. And it's not just for the sake of compliance with regulations or requirements. It's actually something that's going to be there for them if another crisis happens in the future. Especially businesses that ended up finding out that certain coverage wasn't there that they expected to be there. I think they're going to be smarter. They should be smarter going forward. And I would also recommend that they rely heavily on their brokers, insurance brokers who do this all day, understand this, and can work with them to tailor a risk management program to their needs. And then at the personal level, that's my son running out there. On a personal level, I think we're all going to be fine ultimately, but there will be an impact. And I think there is also personal insurance, all the way from health insurance to other types of insurance, where there are certain elements that need to be looked at. In the U.S., in the context of the U.S., that I'm not more familiar with, health insurance is pretty comprehensive, but there are very high deductibles, which means that when I go to a doctor, I still have an out-of-pocket expense. In the UK, it works differently, but also something to look at for individuals.
So what I'm getting from you at this point is re-examine your risk management, re-examine the policies that when they come up for renewal, that would be a prudent thing to do, and discuss this with your risk management team or your insurance company. Possibly even shop around, maybe, would be if I was to add that on, because maybe there's deals had by different companies. And from a personal point of view, I'm getting an optimistic message from you that says this too will pass.
I think so. I'm hopeful. I'm a pretty optimistic individual. But yes, I think so. And I would add one more thing.
Yeah.
Risk is there's risk and then there is reward. And when we think about risk in the insurance industry and anywhere, those two come together. And I think this is also a very special time in the sense that individuals should examine the new risk reward profile of their own investments and their own future assets that they're trying to grow for their family. Super important. We've been talking about the insurance, the downside risk, but there's a big upside now in certain sectors that creates an opportunity for individuals, which is another optimistic way to look at this.
Okay, so I'm getting that we, at the end of the day, to understand that there is risk, as always, check it out, but leaving on an optimistic note. And I think coming from somebody like you who understands risk, that's a great place to be. Sheila Kosalovsky from British Columbia in Canada saying good day, gentlemen, also on. So we've got people coming from basically all over. In the meantime, Matan Slagter, was a pleasure, and I look forward to that next time where we can sit down in a coffee shop and enjoy a drink and a chat together, and dream of wonderful times and wonderful futures. In the meantime, thank you very much for being my guest.
Thank you so much, Dov.
Disclaimer: the Bleaders Business Showcase show is for entertainment purposes only and not professional advice. To inquire about something specific regarding the contents, we suggest you contact the guest speaker directly. Should you wish to apply to be a guest on the show, please contact Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman on factcpfa@gmail.com. Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman is founder of Heads Up CIO, a UK emergency response charity for cognitive psychological first aid, and is a highly experienced psychotherapist, executive business coach, and author of the book Mind Over Terror: 3 Weeks, 2 Cities, 1 Mission. With over 10,000 hours of experience and academic degrees in government, law, clinical social work, and a postgraduate diploma in psychiatry with distinction, Dov is well placed to help you. He's also available for public speaking and corporate training.